Okay, another day at the shop, another car to repair. Today we've got a 96 Nissan Maxima. Customer complains about some issues of coolant leaking and a nice grinding noise coming from the engine. I've determined it to be the water pump. These are kind of a pain in the rear to do. You can't really see. Looks like somebody's actually been down in there trying to access this. But behind that little pipe-like thing right there, which is actually a tensioner, is the water pump housing cover, way down here. Sorry about my lighting, but it's right in that area. So what we have to do is take this motor mount out, and then we'll have to take that tensioner off. Take that cover off back there, right here, again. And then way back here, there's another cover, which is extremely difficult to see. Sorry guys, as we go along, I'll get a better camera. I'm doing this on a cell phone right now. Get a picture. There we go. You kind of see it. It's like a little 4-volt cover. Tell you what, once I get this motor mount off, we'll see if we can get a better picture of it for you. But, that's what we got to get into. 2 access covers, a motor mount, probably about 16 volts, and this job will be well underway. I'm going to go ahead and jack it up, support the passenger side here with a jack stand because we will have to raise the motor up a little bit. And, of course, dropping that motor mount will let the engine fall. So I will check back with you guys here in a few minutes. Alright, I got the car jacked up. Have it supported with the jack stand. Guys, you don't know how important it is to use jack stands. It really is the difference between life and death. I know there's a lot of guys that buy very expensive jacks and really trust them, but you really shouldn't. Also, I've got my engine supported with my jack and a block of wood. Another thing is always use a block of wood between your jack and your oil pan. You don't know how easy it is to collapse it and drive that oil pan straight into your crankshaft, causing a lot of problems and costing you a lot more money than you should have paid in the first place. So, just another thing to do. Be very careful when you're doing it also. Don't just cram it right into the engine. Don't try and Superman the jack into the engine and again collapse your oil pan. It's just not worth it, guys. Take your time when you're doing this stuff. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove that motor mount, which looks fairly simple. 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. Maybe a few more that I can't see quite yet, but we're going to start with the 4 and go from there. I'll keep you updated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it looks like there's quite a few more bolts. But as soon as I get it off, we'll turn the video back on and see what's happening. I'd love to show it coming off, but I'm having to use my phone as my camera right now, so it's just not going to work out. Alright, be back. Okay, while attempting to remove the motor mount, I realized that there is a bolt on the bottom underneath on the casing here. And it looks like the easiest way to get to it is to go ahead and remove the tensioner if it already has to be removed anyway, which is pretty simple. Bolt in the center of the pulley, and then looks like 2 more bolts at the edge. So we'll pop that off real quick, and then I'll come right back to you after I get the mount removed. Okay, to remove the tensioner, you've got 3 bolts after you remove that pulley. The center nut is a 14mm, which is what we've used for everything so far. I used just a standard wrench, box wrench for that. Looks like the 3 bolts to remove the actual assembly is going to be 12mm. 2 on the bottom. And 1 on the top right there. To the left. Or, I'm sorry, to the right of the adjustment. and it'll come off and give us access to that lower nut on the engine mount. Alright, so I'll check back in a few. Alright, there's your tensioner assembly removed. Now guys, I always try and keep the bolts with the parts that I take off, especially on assemblies like this. If you were to misplace a washer or put the washer back in the wrong spot behind this pulley, it would not work correctly and cause a lot of problems down the road. So, kind of keep the bolts in the holes. The washers where they go. It'll make it a lot easier when you're going to reinstall this stuff. Like I said before, it was that center nut right there, which is 14mm, and then a 12mm nut here, and then two 12mm nuts in the bottom, and that whole assembly comes right off, no issue. Next, to tackle the bottom motor mount bolt, we can go ahead and remove the rest of this motor mount. Check back in a few. Alright, got the motor mount out. So it ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts to get that thing out. Wasn't too bad though. There it is. So just like I said, I try and keep the bolts where they go so it's easier for reassembly. Go ahead and get the piece down there. Go ahead and get the engine side of the motor mount assembly off. 2 bolts, pretty simple. And that should give us access to everything we need from there. Alright, I'm going to take a small break and be back soon. Alright, we've got the engine mount off. This is what the mount from the body bolts to. It was 3 bolts, not 2. I'm making all kinds of mistakes today when I tell you what I need to take off. All 3 bolts were 17mm, 2 bolts and 1 nut, and that pretty much cleared up the area down there. Now you can see very clearly the water pump housing, and on this side you've got your timing tensioner housing. You can't really get a real good shot of it still, but there you go. That's it. See, rusty bolt in the back and a greasy bolt on top. There's a timing tensioner back there. So 4 10mm bolts on each. You'll have to pry them off. When you put them back on, you'll have to put silicone on them. But we're going to take those off and see what we've got in behind there. We're going to have to release the tension on the timing chain, so we'll be able to remove the water pump without removing the timing chain on this. So let's get to work and see what we've got. Be back in a few. Okay, we got both covers off. Wasn't too difficult. There's the end of your water pump. You can see the chain driving around the pulley. That's our next issue. We have to take tension off the chain so we can get that water pump out. Back there is your timing tensioner and your guide. So what you do on these is you take the top bolt out and you loosen the bottom bolt, which allows that tensioner to pivot back. You depress the piston in it and put a grenade pin or piece of wire, paper clip, something to hold that piston back so it doesn't spring out into your timing cover. Be very careful not to do that. Do not drop any bolts down there. Otherwise, you're going to have to pull that timing cover and it's just going to be a nightmare for you. So that's what we're going to do next. Pull that timing tensioner out, and then we're going to work on getting the slack off the water pump. Alright, see you in a few. Okay, we got the timing tensioner out. Boy, was that a pain. Basically, like I said, we took the top bolt out, loosened the bottom bolt, depressed the piston in it, and stuck a pin in it so it would not spring out. Make sure that you do that, otherwise the piston will end up in the timing cover. What you have to do is you have to pull the timing chain guide forward. I don't know if you can see that right now. Try and get you a better picture of it. It's probably about as good as we're going to get. But there's a timing chain guide in there that you have to pull forward in order to get that tensioner out. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do to take the slack off the water pump is we're going to turn the crank about 20 degrees counterclockwise, and that'll take the slack off the timing chain on the water pump side, and that'll let us go ahead and take the bolts out and remove this water pump. So I will be back within a few minutes. Thanks. Alright, we finally got the water pump out. Wasn't too hard. This thing is shot. Just to give you a heads up, to get this thing out, you take the 2 bolts from your tensioner on the motor, not the timing tensioner, but the motor tensioner, and you thread it in. There's 2 threaded holes to actually push the pump out of the motor. So, there is no way to pull it out without doing that. It's just next to impossible. The thread pitch on the bolts is 8 by 1.25. They work perfectly fine to do it. Now, what I was trying to tell you on this one is that if I can get this thing to hold up. Hey, James, come hold this phone so I can show these people what's wrong with this pump. Please. Hold it. Hold it the other way. No. There you go. Let me see here. If you look, this thing barely turns, but I don't know if you guys can hear that. There we go. Can hear. That water pump is toast. That is the grinding and the water leakage that we had. So now it's time to put the thing back together. Alright, talk to you guys in a few minutes. Alright, we have got the pump in. What I'm going to do is go ahead and fill the cooling system and check for leaks. Now is the time to do that, not after you got everything together. So we're going to do that, make sure there's no leaks, and then come back and start assembling everything. Alright, we got all the covers back on. We got the timing tensioner back in and that cover back on. Be extremely careful when you put that timing tensioner back in. It was a pain in the rear. But we do have them back on, so now we're going to just start putting it together. It's ready to roll. Should be in about another 15-20 minutes. This thing will be done and out the door. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you updated. Alright, we got the motor mount back in. The only thing left is to install the belt tensioner, fill it with oil, and we are done. So, looking good. Hopefully we've got this thing licked. Check back in a few. Alright, we got it all together. Oil's changed. Antifreeze is topped off. We're getting ready to crank it over. Man, that doesn't sound rough. But it did start. Give it a little bit to try and quiet down. But it is running. This thing's probably going to need some timing sensors and stuff. But I think that's it. We'll get back on it. Alright, we got her together after taking it on a test drive, letting that tensioner fill with the oil. Sounds a lot better than it did. So, looks like we got it together. Everything turned out great. Customers should be on their way to get it.